All right, this is spot 9 for the history lab class at Cal State East Bay, and I'm Austin Rogers. And this spot is on the Mexican cession that was bequeathed to the United States from Mexico in the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo in February of 1848. So, what I want to get into is the context surrounding the signing of the treaty and the determination of America and the politicians of America to take the lands that eventually were annexed by the United States government from Mexico. So first, as I referenced in my previous point on the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, there were calls, especially from expansionists in the United States government, to take all of Mexican lands. The decision to take in the treaty for suing for peace just lands north of the political borders of Mexico today. I believe that it's a thesis of my own, had to do with the discovery of gold in Coloma, California, just prior to the signing of the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. That was in January of 1848, and the treaty was signed in February of 1848, theoretically 9 days after the discovery of gold in Coloma, California. Now, getting into some of the specifics of why this theory exists for me is first the motive of the United States at the time was ardently expansionist. So that's kind of setting the stage. So logically and realistically, based on that motive, I would assume that the actors in play would have taken lands could they have. That's one. Because the Mexican cession actually was 530,000 square miles of land. And that's a significant portion of the United States. It was taken for, at the time, $15 million in compensation for the Mexican government, and this led the Whig Intelligencer, a pamphlet written by the Whig and for the Whig Party in 1848 to say, America takes nothing by conquest, thank God. I got that out of A People's History of the United States by Howard Zinn. It's like the overarching theme of the Mexican War chapter in that book. But I wanted to point this out because, again, there's a language here that's softening the somewhat obviousness of the expansionism taking place from the Mexican-American War. But additionally, the sum of $15 million in 1848 today is significantly less than $1 billion adjusted for inflation for 530,000 square miles of land, which is, you don't need to know a whole lot about real estate to know that that is not enough money for a fair deal to have taken place. In fact, I wanted to point out that the gold in California that was mined during the gold rush was in the ballpark of 3,700 tons. And so just conceptually, if we're thinking gold's discovered in Coloma, California in January of 1848, and there's the warring that's happening in Mexico City, and there's calls to take all of Mexico, and then this information comes that, there's gold in California. I believe wholeheartedly that had a lot to do with the timing of the signing of the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, and again, it would have been a resoundingly smart investment to end the war quickly with a small compensation for the lands that were ceded to the United States, because again, the powers that be were very aware of the power that California and the western land ceded by Mexico would become, and this was a enormous catalyst for the United States Civil War. And that's one of the main takeaways for the significance of what the Mexican-American War was in the history of the United States. It was, I would argue, the single largest catalyst, and I mean catalyst, for the American Civil War. Not cause, obviously, but catalyst, bringing it to the forefront, because, of course, war breaks out in 1848, but when the war war breaks out in 1840, in the 1840s. When it actually ends, there's about 13 years until the American Civil War breaks out. And of course, the conflict being states' rights and slavery, and is it as an institution capable of continuing in the United States? But the obvious economic power that the West was going to be was too evident for Southern powers, the white slave power, to take sitting down. And obviously the election of Abraham Lincoln, who had previously advocated against Polk in Congress to prove where blood was shed on American soil. It might have been John Taylor, but the spot resolutions of Abraham Lincoln being still fresh in the mind of Southerners when he was elected, and being against the war in Mexico, which was in many ways an expansion of slavery, and understood as going to be an expansion of the slave state in the United States. Because again, the men who led the charge were slave advocates, like John Taylor and Polk and Buchanan, and the people in the high places of government and military at that time. And so, kind of wrapping up the unit, or the story map, I wanted to have that as the main takeaway here, is that the Mexican-American War, its significance was, of course, the ceding of the lands to the United States, and I would argue the most significant is California, and, that probably having been immediately evident because of when the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo was signed compared to the discovery of gold in California, and the metrics of which the compensation was for Mexico, and the actual payout of what California and the entire western section of lands would become. While the actual lands are significant, the propulsion into what slavery is in the country and would it continue west, I think, is the most significant aspect of the Mexican-American War at the end, even more so than the lands. Because had the lands not been ceded, there's a chance that equilibrium might have just happened in the eastern United States, and perhaps the circumstances that led to slavery being questioned as an institution the way that it was wouldn't have taken place had Mexico kept the lands west of the Mississippi, and the states could have politically divided themselves and maintained a certain, like I said, economic equilibrium that was dependent on the institution of slavery. It was the expansion of lands westward and the question of whether or not would slavery expand with those lands westward that really catalyzed the entire process and brought the American Civil War to the forefront, and again, even helped launch Abraham Lincoln's career, and was fresh in the minds of the white slaveholding South when Abraham Lincoln was elected. And of course, that is when the secession occurred. All right, thank you for watching my video.